The Black Lives Matter movement, the women's suffrage movement, the civil rights movement. Social movements are supposed to improve society, and most benefit the people and the country. However, there are some movements that harm the minorities, and these are rarely talked about. One of the most relevant, and most harmful, was the Eugenics program, which sterilized thousands of people and played a large part in the plans of Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. Even though the United States is widely known to have fought against Germany during World War II, the American eugenics program was used as a blueprint by Nazis and is partially to blame for the Holocaust. Eugenics are, put simply, a pseudoscience aimed at improving the human race. While the idea of eugenics has been around since Plato, the first person to coin the term eugenics was Sir Francis Galton in Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development, his novel published in 1883. He defines eugenics as the science of improving stock, not only by judicious mating, but whatever tends to give the more suitable races or strains of blood a better chance of prevailing over the less suitable than they otherwise would have had.
At the core of the movement's belief system was the conviction that human heredity was fixed and immutable, that it's nature, not nurture, that makes you the human being that you are. The idea in a nutshell is this, that if you can breed a better dog or horse, as humankind has been doing for centuries, we can breed a better person.
There are two distinct types of eugenics, positive and negative, also known as liberal and authoritative. This distinction was first made in 1909 by an obstetrician of the name Caleb Williams Saleeby. Positive eugenics, the more modern idea of eugenics, are based on encouraging the fit, intelligent, and healthy to have more children. The aim of a positive eugenics program is to expand reproductive opportunities. Negative eugenics, on the other hand, are based on stopping bad genes from being reproduced and limiting reproduction for people deemed inferior, that being disabled people, people of color, people with mental illnesses, and people of lower social classes. The eugenics movement in the United States, which was around for the majority of the 20th century, was leaning much more towards negative eugenics rather than positive. When one thinks of eugenics, sterilization comes to mind. And while this was one of the most common methods of forced eugenics, there were other impactful practices as well. These included segregation laws, marriage restrictions based on race, forceful abortion, and, in extreme cases, euthanasia. There were also methods that eugenicists used to determine whether someone was, quote-unquote, genetically superior, such as giving them milk from a cow with tuberculosis to see if they would survive. Over the course of the 20th century, around 60,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized by eugenic practitioners, and thousands more were barred from marrying who they wanted. The majority of the people who were sterilized were women considered overtly sexual. A prime example of this is Carrie Bell in the famous Buck v. Bell case, who, at the age of 17, already destitute, became pregnant and was therefore deemed feeble-minded. She was sterilized as soon as her baby was born. For such an unjust movement, there was a surprising amount of support. Biologists were very active in the eugenics community, despite the pseudoscience not being backed by research. This, paired with propaganda convincing people eugenics bettered society, led to many being in favor of the movement. These people were mostly those who would benefit from eugenics, white, upper-class people. However, this didn't mean there weren't people against the eugenics movement. Some thought it stupid to force people to marry intelligently, and immoral to prevent people from having children. Most of these people believed that eugenics benefited society, but thought that eugenicists were going about it in the wrong way. Overall, the goal of the eugenics movement was to populate the country with intelligent, Aryan people with no disabilities. If this sounds similar to the goals of another country around the same time, there's a reason for that.
Meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
Adolf Hitler was Chancellor of Germany from 1933 until his death in 1945. He was the leader of the Nazi Party, an extremely racist and anti-Semitic political organization. His goal was to eradicate from Germany what he wrote to be the world's two greatest evils, Judaism and communism. Hitler and the Nazis are infamous for the Holocaust, a mass genocide focused on eliminating Jews and populating Germany with those of the Aryan race, people with fair skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Although accredited to Hitler, the Aryan race myth began in California with the American Eugenics movement. Hitler studied and used American eugenics laws to legitimatize anti-Semitism, and was able to use a pseudoscientific argument to gain more followers. He also used them to shape the entire German eugenics program. He was a huge supporter of American eugenics, and once wrote a fan letter to Madison Grant, referring to Grant's novel, The Passing of the Great Race, as his Bible.
In a book published in 1922, the American eugenicist Harry Laughlin proposed a model sterilization law. Laughlin's model sterilization law targeted a heterogeneous group of people, those with mental illnesses, developmental disabilities, and physical disabilities. It included even the homeless, the poor, and alcoholics. When one compares Laughlin's model law to the Nazi sterilization law about a decade later, one finds an almost one-to-one correspondence between them in terms of the groups they targeted. This was no coincidence. The Nazis paid close attention to the US as the world leader in eugenic sterilizations before 1933.
In the Nuremberg trials, the Nazis quoted Supreme Court Justice Wendell Holmes, who in 1927 wrote, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." This interest of Hitler's was not one-sided. The Rockefeller Center, one of the main sponsors of American eugenics, also helped fund the German eugenics program. And while the United States was fighting against Germany in World War II, eugenicists in California and other states were spreading Nazi propaganda. In the United States, most students are taught about how the great US fought the evil Germany in World War II. Few have heard of the eugenics program, and even fewer know of how much it impacted the Holocaust. It's common for school systems to only teach about what makes their country look good, and as a result, most people are uneducated about the appalling things their country has done. It is true that the United States played a huge part in defeating the Nazis, and some would argue that this makes up for how the American eugenics program contributed to the Holocaust. However, just because the US did good things in the war, it doesn't mean the bad things they did should be overlooked, as is the mindset of so many people. The eugenics program had terrible effects, both in the United States and in Europe. The eugenics movement was an important part of American and German history that is rarely talked about, and resulted in the deaths of millions of people. While significant that the US fought against Germany during World War II, it's important to acknowledge the tremendous impact the US had on the Holocaust. It brings one to consider the question of whether the relationship between Germany and the United States at the time was as hostile as it seemed.